I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken, live episode number 18. And breaking right now, how many more children need to die on our streets, Prime Minister? Keir Starmer was heckled in the last hour at the site of the Southport Massacre as the 3 victims were named and pictured for the first time. I'm so sorry, little BB. Elise and Alice, your country let you down. A special digest on why we must be angry about what happened in just a minute. Also coming up on the show today, my superstar panellists Christine and Neil Hamilton react to the horrifying breaking news of the day from Southport, as well as the jailing of Anjem Choudary for life and the disgusting distraction the Just Stop Oil criminals have been providing the police with more criminal antics at Heathrow Airport today. Then later in the show, our royal mastermind Angela Levin returns to reveal why the royal family have edited Meghan Markle out of its official history. And do remember to sign up to our uncancelled after show today. You can register to watch on our own website at www.outspoken.live. Angela will be joining me for the full half hour today with even more royal exclusives. And remember, this is a safe space free of the censorship and control of big tech. Your support at just £5 a month not only gives you 30 minutes of extra content every single weekday, it also allows me to continue to make this independent daily news show. Let's go. Yep, I'm heartbroken for the families of the precious little girls stabbed to death at a Taylor Swift dance class in broad daylight in Southport yesterday. But trust me, I'm much more furious than upset. We cannot keep on going like this. Again and again, tragedy after tragedy, cold-blooded murder after cold-blooded murder, with more platitudes, more weasel words, more talk of not looking back in anger, and insistence that today isn't the moment for politics or hard discussions. And then the news cycle moves on, leaving devastated families to pick up the pieces as the gormless and weak politicians are able to avoid answering the hard questions about what they are doing to our country. Well, I am done with that. Enough is enough. We are importing extremism into our streets to the point where our children are not safe at a Taylor Swift dance class. It cannot go on. So I want to say sorry to 6-year-old BB King. Your country has let you down. And what an adorable little girl she was. Sorry too to Elsie Sancombe, a 7-year-old with a bright smile and an even brighter future. Your country has let you down. And sorry too to Alice Aguiar, 9 years old, also stabbed to death in broad daylight yesterday. Our politicians will still not talk about what we all know resulted in this massacre: mass immigration and the failure of multiculturalism. What else explains a 17-year-old teenager with Rwandan parents causing terror at a dance class that he knew would be attended by young girls? Assimilation is failing and our streets are no longer safe. Now, I appreciate many might criticize me for talking about this today, but I am so sick of these issues being swept under the carpet and conveniently being blamed on mental health or knife crime. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, who has overseen a reign of terror on our streets since taking the job, pulled out all the usual lines today.
What should have been a children's party having fun in the beginning of the summer holidays could then turn into something so devastating. There's obviously deep concern about knife attacks across the country, and that's why the Prime Minister has said that that is a moral mission to address this. But I think for today, the issue really is about Southport, and the issue is about the families who have been affected in this case, and all of us praying for the injured children and for the little children who have been lost.
I know we're running really tight on time, but I just want to quickly ask you, Home Secretary, is there anything else you can tell us about the perpetrator? For example, were they known to the authorities?
Well, Merseyside police are leading this extremely important and serious criminal investigation. This was a horrific attack, and they need to be able to get on with that work, and they will provide us with updates. You'll understand that others should not be speculating or commenting in advance of those updates, and we really welcome the work of Merseyside police. But it's also important that they pursue every single angle of inquiry.
Oh yes, let's not speculate. Let's just follow the narrative. And all of those sorts of lines were repeated by Keir Starmer in a meaningless interview later on. So no wonder he was heckled as he made a surprise visit to the Southport Massacre site today to lay flowers.
How many more children have died in our streets, Prime Minister? How many more children? How many more children, Prime Minister? Are we going to do something?
Time to change, Starmer.
Come on, it's needed. How many more children? Is it mine next? What's shameful? Bye-bye. You got your photos, off you go. Make a real change, Prime Minister. Make a real change! Our children! Go away!
I just found out my friend's 9-year-old daughter.
Good on those people. Now, I don't know if you could hear it at the end there, but there was one woman who said she'd just found out her friend's 9-year-old child had been stabbed. So I feel and I completely understand the visceral anger from those patriots, and I actually believe it needs to be harnessed responsibly to force real change. I want to contrast two different reactions today. Scotland's failed ex-First Minister, Humza Useless, posted this on X. He wrote, "Simply awful. Our only response to the evil we witnessed in Southport yesterday should be an outpouring of grief for the children and adults killed in such a senseless attack. If you use such a tragedy to fuel bigotry, then you are the worst kind of humanity." But contrast that to the Neighbours actress Holly Candy, a mum who now lives in London. She wrote on the same platform, "Lay awake all night next to my babies weeping. Could have been any of us. We're actually done for here. Wake up. Leave the ECHR. Arm police. Bring back capital punishment. Grow an effing pair. We are weak as piss, and the media needs to stop shoving a bunch of DEI shit down everyone's throats. You're destroying the nation." I know who I'm with. Talk of unity and the community coming together and holding our families closer is all completely futile. When 3 little girls are stabbed to death at a dance class, enough is enough. We are done. To react now, let me bring in today's superstar panel. And today I am joined by the husband and wife duo, Neil Hamilton. He is the former leader of the UKIP party, and Christine Hamilton, author, political commentator, entertainer, raconteur, and so much more besides. It is great to have you here both today, but obviously in the most terrible circumstances, Neil, and I'm angry.
Yeah, well, you're right to be angry. And the last thing we want is politicians like Starmer and Yvette Cooper weeping their crocodile tears and wringing their hands uselessly whilst mouthing platitudes when, as the people, the real people on the street were angry and entitled to be, they really knew that these people are never going to do anything practical to sort out the problem of knife crime, which is running riot, not just in Merseyside, but throughout our big cities all throughout the country. You know, people like Starmer, who was, let's never forget, Director of Public Prosecutions for many years, and like all lefty lawyers, is fundamentally weak-kneed on crime and punishment. These are the people who are actually responsible, ultimately, for events such as that which has happened in Southport in the last 24 hours. So what we want is real action, tough action, to punish and deter those who might be inclined to carry out these grotesque acts.
Christine, where are you at today? Angry or devastated?
Well, both. If this had happened in London, people would be saying this is what happens in London. But the fact that it's happened in a small, relatively small seaside town where people go to have fun on their holidays, enjoy the beach, makes it somehow worse, because things like that don't happen in Southport. They happen in London, but they don't happen in Southport. So I think that spreads it out. And I can't help thinking, and I'm sure everybody else in a similar position, of the little girls I know who are about that age. And you think it could have been them. And it is time to do something. We cannot just sit back and let this happen. This would never have happened 40 years ago, 30 years ago. The England that I grew up in, this would never have happened. It didn't happen. A murder was the most incredibly, almost never, ever event. Now it's all too often happening. And look where it's coming from. Look at the perpetrators, generally speaking. And we can't go on brushing this under the carpet. But whether I'm angry or sad, it's almost unbelievable. I mean, how those parents and families are going to come to terms with what's happened, I just don't know. I mean, people die every day. Children die every day for different reasons. But to die at the hands of a madman, he must be mad. There's no excuse. I'm not excusing him in any shape or form, but no sane person would do that.
The thing is, Neil, this is where the mental health issue can be a difficult one, because, yep, clearly anyone who goes in and stabs 11 young children and their teachers at a Taylor Swift dance class, well, of course they are mad. But Neil, can we also just be honest about the fact that a lot of these people do have an ingrained hatred of our country, of our society, and of our way of life? And simply because this man was born in this country doesn't necessarily mean that he has assimilated, because we are increasingly seeing a failure, Neil, of multiculturalism.
Yeah, of course, we see that most spectacularly in the case of murders and other crimes that are committed in the cause of radical Islam. Now, we've no idea whether there's anything involved with that in this particular example, maybe not, as the family from Rwanda. But nevertheless, what we have seen in the last 20 or 30 years in particular is the gradual fracturing of society and the destruction of what was, as Christine said, in the decades where we grew up, a fundamentally wholly cohesive society where we all had the same norms of conduct. We had respect for the police and the organs of authority. That has very largely gone, certainly from the centres of our great cities. Today, you see feral populations, at the weekend in particular, people behaving in the most appalling way. And we see a dramatic rise in crimes related to knives. And the prevalence of knives amongst young people today is something which is wholly horrifying, and in our days was completely unknown. Absolutely, totally unknown in the 1950s and the 1960s. And yet now it's tolerated, even if it's not condoned. What we need is to bring back stop and search powers in particular to begin with. And they were, of course, removed because they were regarded as racist in the hands of the police. And that, of course, brings us back to the question which you posed. It is where identity politics has actually taken over from what was at one time a wholly cohesive society where we all behaved largely in the same way and had the same broad hopes and aspirations, shared a loyalty to the crown, to our country, to our institutions, were not ashamed of our history, and were proud of what we had brought to the world. That has been destroyed by politicians of all the main parties, actually, either by commission or omission. The Tories have been fantastically useless at standing up to these trends. And in fact, they are part of the problem, not the solution, which is why, of course, they were so spectacularly booted out on the 4th of July. So, there has to be a fundamental change in the political system in this country in order to put the people back in charge, because the elites have let us down right, left and centre.
Absolutely, and they are changing the demographics of this country completely against our will, and look at the sorts of issues it's importing. With that, I couldn't agree more. Christine, can we just talk a little bit about what happened at the site today? Because there was a fascinating change in tone over the past couple of hours. So we just saw the footage there of Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, arriving to lay flowers in the morning. And at that point, it was exactly what she wanted. Everyone was quiet. Everyone was respectful. She lay her flowers. She left the scene. She gave her interview full of platitudes afterwards. But in the past hour, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, arrived on site and faced something altogether different. Fury in the streets. People who were asking him directly how many more children are going to die. People whose friends have lost relatives as a result, on the streets yelling at him. Now, Christine, that is quite an extraordinary political moment. I'm almost certain the mainstream media will try and bury it, but I haven't seen that type of visceral anger so soon after a tragedy aimed at the Prime Minister of the day.
No, well, he's about to discover, if he hasn't just discovered in the scene that you outlined, that the buck stops with him. And the Home Secretary may be nominally responsible, but the buck stops with the Prime Minister. And he may say, it's nothing to do with me. I've only been in office for 3 weeks, but he's got to stop this. And my fear is that it's too late to stop it. We have imported in various ways too many people who, as Neil said, they don't share our values, they don't share our norms, they don't share our history, they don't think the way that we think. And they have completely not assimilated. And my fear is that there are so many of them here already that it is too late to turn back the tide. I mean, good luck, Keir Starmer. I want him to succeed. We all want him to succeed. He is the Prime Minister now and probably for the next 5 years at least. And if he doesn't succeed, if he can't do anything about it, then we're all going to be, these situations are going to be repeated, and we're all going to be in this sort of state of anger. And I think it's actually wrong to talk about grief. You can't have grief for somebody you don't know. So it's anger and sadness, incredible sadness.
But I think, Christine, what we can have grief for is the country that we once knew.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
the country that is being lost in so many ways. Now, Neil, look.
And why is it being lost? We all know why, don't we?
Of course. Now, on that note, Neil, you know a lot about what Christine was just talking about, because up until very recently, you were the leader of the UKIP party and you had developed a very strong policy prescription about how you could stop illegal immigration. Now, you will have seen what Keir Starmer's policy prescription is, and Neil, it's doomed to fail, isn't it? He's put all of his stock on smashing the criminal gangs, which is exactly what has been done for the past 5 years. It's impossible to do that. So it feels like by turning illegal immigration into irregular immigration, Labour is almost accepting that we are going to continue to have an invasion of our shores.
Well, they're either totally deluded or they're being dishonest. Probably a combination of both. We've had a war on drugs for as long as I can remember. Smashing the drug gangs has been one of the main aims of government's penal policy. That has been a total and absolute failure. All we do know about the drug gangs is they've now been taken over by illegal migrants. So that I think shows you how effective Starmer's proposed policy on legal migration is going to be. Their answer to solving illegal migration is to make all the illegals legal, to give them an amnesty. 100,000 of them are going to be given an amnesty, effectively. That's what they've announced already, and they've only been in office for 3 weeks. We're adding 750,000 people to our population every single year at the moment through a combination of legal and illegal migration. That is bringing about massive structural changes to the population of this country, and which will be felt for generations to come. And just the religious makeup of the country is changing out of all recognition. I took advantage of an hour before we came on air to look at the figures on the Muslim population of Britain, for example. In England and Wales, between the 2010 census and the 2020 census, our population grew by 3.5 million, and a third of that population growth was Muslims. So, I'm not saying that most Muslims are not peaceable and probably very decent people as much as you or I are, but nevertheless, the cultural norms that are going to be imposed upon the people of this country are very, very different from the ones that we grew up.
Because remember, Neil, the polls show when Muslim people are polled, and of course, this is their belief, so maybe it's not a surprise, but the majority of Muslims agree with Sharia law. The majority of Muslims agree that homosexuality should be illegal. I mean, I think it is fair to say that a large proportion of those arrivals into our country will not share many of our values and ethics, and that is part of the issue. Now, look, there's been some extraordinary media coverage over the past 24 hours, but I want to play you a particularly shocking moment from the British Bashing Corporation, who not only are trying to bury the real story, but what has happened to our public broadcaster? They can't even get basic facts right. So watch this extraordinary clip where a commentator, not challenged by the presenter, tries to equate what happened in Southport with Dunblane, which we all know was caused by gun violence, not knife crime. Watch what happened, and I'll get you to react off the bat.
Daniel, mass stabbings in this country are extremely rare, aren't they?
They are extremely rare. Obviously, we've had some very high-profile mass stabbings which have been linked to terrorism, and then we've had some exceptionally distressing mass stabbings, most infamously, of course, in Dunblane back in 1996, I believe that was, when a significant number of primary school children were stabbed to death in a mass stabbing. But this is not something that is in any way common, and the number of mass stabbings involving children on this scale, really the only one I can immediately think of is the Dunblane primary school incident in 1996.
I mean, Christine, they do not know what they're talking about.
Absolutely incredible. I mean, I don't know who he was, that fellow, but the fact that he doesn't know that Dunblane had absolutely nothing whatever to do with stabbings is extraordinary. And as you say, the BBC didn't push back at all.
No, well, because she probably didn't know that he was wrong either. That's the problem, isn't it? These people are not rigorous journalists. And we know that the BBC peddles its own propaganda lines. It isn't actually a news corporation at all in huge areas of policy, not least on climate change, where they are quite explicitly propagandists for the alarmist view. And similarly with all their sort of liberal nostrums, whether it's from Brexit to knife crime, you'll find the BBC completely in bed with the likes of Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper in their North London Islington mindset. That's part of the problem. That's why BBC viewing numbers, of course, have been plummeting, because who wants to watch this nonsense? We never bother watching the BBC for the news anymore, whereas at one time everybody turned on the news at 6 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whenever it was, where you had the old-fashioned kind of newscasters. And so the world has completely changed, and the BBC, I'm afraid, has changed much, much for the worse as a result.
Maybe the less said about traditional BBC news anchors, the better today, given the other issue that they're currently dealing with. But look, propaganda isn't just coming from the BBC. Now, there's been a lot of speculation that the public has actually been managed or nudged, even by the police. So look at this tweet from Stephen Barrett, the eminent lawyer, who wrote, "I have been privately contacted by a police officer, which is rare for me, and told that we are being told about the Southport, what we're being told about the Southport stabbings is being managed, and that their priority is that our response is managed. innocent children are dead. I do not need to be managed. And then the Conservative commentator David Atherton, he actually has a whistleblower, someone who he says is involved in this or has information on this, who went one step further. So he writes today, it appears Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is managing the release of information on the Southport murders. One of my followers, who is a former police officer, blows the whistle. And this former police officer wrote to David saying, I just read your recent post regarding Merseyside Police managing information. This is exactly what happened when I was in South Yorkshire Police with reference to the Rotherham Muslim grooming gangs. Thankfully, I served many years in Doncaster, so never worked in Rotherham, so had no dealings or involvement with the grooming gangs. However, I do remember one briefing where we were told not to inflame community tensions by not openly discussing the perpetrators were Muslims. No one, including our inspector or sergeants, agreed. This was a directive from the then Labour government. There were and still are a lot of good cops out there who are sick of being used and abused by politicians. It's a disgrace that this management of information is still going on across each and every force. So do you think we are being managed here in some way? Is that why we're never told the full story, Neil? And is that why our politicians say things like, today is not the day for politics, when a tragedy like this occurs?
We just want facts, don't we? It's not politics, it's facts.
I'm afraid Yvette Cooper's deep concern isn't enough, is it? Who cares whether she's deeply concerned or not? What we want is a penal policy which is going to produce results. And you're absolutely right. The top brass in the police are fundamentally useless, and they're completely signed up to the DEI agenda. You don't get promoted to the top ranks of the police unless you're fully woke and fully committed, at least openly and outwardly, to the agenda of the likes of Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer. Above the rank of superintendent or chief superintendent, it's a completely different world. And politics then rules the roost rather than fighting crime. And that's why the police have been so spectacularly useless at doing the job that we pay them for. They're all right for attending gay rights parades and so on, but ask them actually to solve a crime and you can forget it, especially if it's what they call low-level crime. And the disgraceful decision to say that no crimes involving amounts of money of less than £200 would be shoplifting would be looked at in future by police forces just tells you all you need to know about an organisation which is simply not fit for purpose.
What about... Oh, sorry, Christine.
Well, I was just saying, you mentioned Rotherham, and I forget now how many years ago that was, but it was absolutely scandalous that because of fears of racial tension and fears of fingering the wrong people, they didn't kill that off much more quickly. And so many girls could have been saved from the most horrendous experiences if only the police had been more upfront, open and honest with us. And the authorities generally, it wasn't just the police, as I understand it, as far as Rotherham was concerned.
Yeah, and the point about crime is that it affects most and worst the people who live in deprived communities.
Well, indeed.
In particular, black on black crime is something that you're not allowed to talk about today. And yet it is certainly true in parts of London that the people who suffer most from knife crime and other crimes of violence and extortion and so on are actually black people. And it's by those in their own communities who are exploiting them. But we can't talk openly about these things because our politicians don't want that narrative to be discussed. And the police are fully signed up to suffocating free discussion on these very important issues. If we can't discuss these issues honestly and freely, then we will never get to the bottom of the problem and solve it.
Neil, lots of folk have messaged me privately today advocating for the return of the death penalty in cases like this. What do you think? Is it time?
Well, I voted when I was a Member of Parliament back in the 80s and 90s, when occasionally there was a vote on capital punishment, for the restoration of capital punishment as a final punishment in certain cases. A lot of the problems that occurred with miscarriages of justice in the 50s and 60s and before, of course, today would not have occurred because of the availability of DNA evidence and so on. And every case has to be looked at on its individual merits. Of course, as a lawyer, I fully understand that. But there are certain crimes which are so horrific and so incontrovertibly ascribed to the person who's been convicted, that I do believe that a deterrent effect is necessary. It's very difficult after all these years, 50 years, 60 years, to see capital punishment being restored. I mean, there are all sort of practical problems in doing that, if nothing else, as well as the spiritual and political controversy that it would excite. But I do believe that removing the ultimate penalty of capital punishment has, in a certain section of our community, devalued respect for life itself.
Christine, child killers, killers of police officers, do they deserve to be put to death, Christine?
Well, I've changed my view on capital punishment. I used to be against it because I thought it was quite wrong for the state to sanction the taking of life. But now, I'm afraid, I have changed my view, and I think easier to establish without any question that somebody did it because of DNA, etc. And if somebody is caught red-handed, for want of another word, I really don't see why. I mean, why should we put them up at His Majesty's expense for the rest of their lives, which in the case of this guy, is he 17? I think goodness knows how many years that'll be. So I'm afraid I am in favour of it. Now, I don't think it'll ever happen because you'll never get it through the House of Commons. It would always be an issue of conscience. Obviously, it has to be because there are people who their conscience wouldn't let them vote for it. But I can see, on the other hand, I have to say that having experienced at the hand of the courts in this country a miscarriage of justice, personally, there is always the danger of a miscarriage of justice. But I think that is so infinitesimally small. And where there is absolutely cast iron, cut glass evidence, why not, frankly? Why not? They just don't deserve to live. They do not. The guy who's done this in Southport does not deserve to live.
I mean, 17 years old, we can't assume anything as yet, but you would assume he could end up spending the rest of his life in prison. That will cost us tens of millions of pounds over the course of his life. Now, I want to share a fascinating...
We could send him back to Rwanda.
Yes. That would make sense, wouldn't it? That would make sense. I think we had a deal with them recently. Now, look, I want to share a fascinating exchange that I had earlier with Duncan Bannatyne on X. He's, of course, the Scottish entrepreneur, businessman, one of the original dragons. And I wrote, I'd actually posted saying the victims were 6, 7, and 9. Platitudes of don't look back in anger are no longer good enough. I don't know about you, but I'm furious. Duncan then replied saying, I am too upset to be furious. I want to know why so I can understand it all, but I doubt it will ever make sense. I replied saying, I understand that, but if we don't start to get angry, this is going to happen again and again. I've had enough. He replied saying, I agree with you, Dan, but I don't know what we can do. Maybe we need to get together as a country and peacefully march on Downing Street to demand our political leaders put a stop to it. But then he wrote something that shocked me but surprised me, not in a negative way, in a positive way, in an X post that sadly has now been deleted. This is what he had to say. I never really liked Tommy Robinson very much, but maybe he was right all along. Now, Christine, is it time for a bit of a reevaluation in the mainstream of Tommy Robinson and much of what he warned about? Of course, he was seemingly arrested after the very peaceful Uniting the Kingdom march on Saturday in London. But is it right? I mean, clearly someone's got to Duncan and said, oh my God, you can't say that. You've got to delete it immediately. We know that happens when you're a celebrity. But to me, it was really interesting.
Well, it's what he said, so it's obviously what he genuinely feels. The fact that he's deleted it now, why not stand up for what you believe in, Duncan? I mean, what have you got to lose? You've made it. You've made lots of money. You've got a place, a position. That's what you think. Say it and stand by it. I mean, I found it really heartwarming, actually, to see all those Union flags and Union Jacks and St. George's flags in London the other day. Tommy Robinson, in a way, is his own worst enemy because he knew that by showing that video, he was almost taunting the police to arrest him, almost saying, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm doing it. Come on, get me. I wish he hadn't done it because otherwise I think that rally, supported by so many people, was a wonderful display. It's at last the Brits are fighting back against all these endless rallies and marches from the non-Brits, shall we say. So I'm sorry that he was arrested. Goodness knows what will happen. I always worry if he's in prison, because he probably has a pretty grim time. We know he does. He's spoken about it. So please, Tommy, next time, if you know you're not supposed to do something, for goodness sake, don't do it. But, you know, look at them all there. They're up on the screen now, wrapped in British flags. It was wonderful, heartwarming. We should have been there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Tommy Robinson is an authentic voice of the white working class. And, of course, that's the one segment of society that there's open season on amongst the metropolitan liberals. And everybody else can be tolerated, but people like Tommy Robinson can't be tolerated. You know, he's done some pretty silly things in the past and sometimes unpleasant things. But if you look at what he's actually said, there's stuff on YouTube and other platforms which I've heard and seen over the years, including a speech that he made once to the Oxford Union, which is well worth listening to. You know, he's not a dimwit by any means, but I'm afraid that by his conduct, he's made himself into a bit of a pariah, whereas politics is about persuading people and getting yourself into a position where you can actually do something about the evils, ills which beset the nation. Tommy Robinson did want to join UKIP at one time, and Gerard Batten, who was the leader of UKIP at the time, was very keen to get him in. I said, well, it's very difficult to see how one could actually sell somebody like Tommy Robinson, and unless he addresses some of the problems which have made him into a pariah in the past. And so it never happened. But I don't believe that he should be demonised in the way he has been. He certainly shouldn't be targeted and treated by the police in the way that he has been. There's undoubtedly he's been discriminated against by the police establishment as a deflection from their own failures, actually. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Indeed.
To treat a peaceful rally of the kind that he has led more than once, and sometimes the police heavy hand comes down upon him, so that's a news item to distract attention from the main story.
Exactly. The establishment has wanted to shut him up for a long time. Look, finally, someone... Oh, sorry, Christine.
So I was going to say, the mainstream media constantly call anything that he's involved with far right.
Oh, yeah.
What's wrong with patriotic?
Exactly.
Yeah, indeed, because they didn't describe the rival march led by Jeremy Corbyn as far left. A couple of quick breaking news stories that have also developed today. Both, I think, have some relation, actually, to what's been going on in Southport. Firstly, Anjem Choudary jailed for life, not before time, Neil, but should he ever have been released?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. And this man is a self-confessed terrorist, in effect. And the poisonous things that he has said in the past about the society in which he has voluntarily chosen to live are absolutely outrageous. No sane society could possibly allow a person such as Choudary to be at large in order to carry on his destructive work.
Which he was for a long time, Christy.
He was for a long time, as we know. And was it the Finsbury Park Mosque, I think, was it? Was that
where it started?
Where it all started. And this is all happening in plain sight, of course. This is the true story behind all this. The establishment has known perfectly well what's been going on for decades, and it's been growing and getting worse year in, year out, decade in and decade out, until we've got to the stage now where we have perhaps several 100,000 people who share his worldview nestled in our big cities in the United Kingdom. And as Christine was saying earlier on, what can we now do about it to change the structure of our population for the better? There's nothing in practice that we can do. All we can do is control the way in which people like Choudary behave. And if they step out of line in a way which is criminal, then we make sure they're prosecuted and they are banged up for as long as is necessary.
I mean, he should have been banged up ages ago. People just pussyfoot around it because they're terrified of being accused of racism.
Which is Islamophobia.
Or Islamophobia.
Yeah, indeed.
If you or I behaved like he did, we wouldn't be allowed to get away with it.
Well, no. And speaking of the most appalling behaviour, and the reason I'm so angry about this one today, and I usually hate giving these people attention, but the reason I am so mad, right, is because I don't think our police are particularly well managed at the moment, but you see how brave they are at an event like yesterday in Southport, and you know that they need to be focusing on that rather than focusing on Joey Barton's tweets or the absolute despicable idiots from Just Stop Oil. So I want to talk to you about Phoebe Plummer. And this is the Just Stop Oil activist who right now is likely to be thrown in jail. She had already been told to prepare for jail after throwing soup over Vincent van Gogh's sunflowers at National Gallery in central London. She then glued her hands to the wall beneath it, and the judge was absolutely furious. But while awaiting sentencing, she decided to cause chaos today at Heathrow.
Why hasn't she been stopped? Where are the airport police?
Well, exactly, Christine. Sorry, I was just hearing you there.
Sorry,
Why?
I didn't know whether
No. It was exactly my thinking. This is Heathrow Airport. What if she were a terrorist? Would she just be allowed to do that? At an American airport, you would probably be shot. I mean, utterly furious about it. But then, look at how she... Sorry, you go.
Well, that's Phoebe Plummer, is it? Who's awaiting sentence already?
Yes. And this is her video where she spoke about why she was doing it today.
My name's Phoebe. I'm 22 and I'm from London. And today I took action with Just Stop Oil because I cannot bear to stand by and do nothing whilst the massive harm of the climate crisis unfolds. Earlier this year, an IPCC scientist was quoted saying, "I expect a semi-dystopian future with substantial pain and suffering to the people of the global south. The world's response to date is reprehensible. We live in an age of fools." We know what this means, that continuing to burn fossil fuels is murderous and it is racist.
Yes, it's racist.
Yeah,
of course it's racist.
Oil is black, you know. And oil is black when it comes out of the ground.
I mean, I've heard it all now, but
yeah.
Look at the age she is. What did she say? 22. She has been
22 going on 3.
Indoctrinated and been
mind-swept. She has, but she should be in jail now, right?
Of course he should.
And have you noticed they've all got names like Phoebe and Cressida and Justin and Torquil?
These
are middle-class hysterics who don't actually know what life is really like if you haven't got the bank of mum and dad to support you, and if you have to if you have difficulty paying your electricity bill every month because of the extra cost of renewables that's added on to everybody's bills. And the idea that person described as a scientist, almost certainly not a scientist, working for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The clue is in the name. It's not a scientific body, it's a government body, and they're all politicians with their snouts in the trough. And there's an army of people like them now throughout the world who are sucking on the taxpayers' teats and making a fat living out of it, travelling to conferences on climate change in places like Rio de Janeiro, and they're travelling on jets, of course, rather than paddling canoes. So what we do know about climate change is, because climate change has happened ever since the world first was created. Climate change is always with us. Sometimes climate is warming, sometimes it's cooling. At the moment, we are in a period of warming, mild warming. As a result, the planet's getting greener. The larger part of the planet is able to grow crops in temperate zones than was the case 100 years ago. That's why we can feed the vastly increasing population of the planet. But these facts don't seem to have percolated into the heads of people like Phoebe Plummer.
No, exactly. Lock her up. I say lock her up. Absolutely.
Lock her up for a very long. I would give her 10 years when she comes out.
Yeah, exactly. We have to start
no
making an example.
No central heating in the winter in her cell, please.
Yes, no. Indeed. Look, on a very sad day, you've brought a little bit of joy back into my life. Neil and Christine Hamilton, the best husband and wife act in all of British politics. Thank you both so much. Fabulous superstar panel. Now do stand by. Don't go anywhere. Angela Levin, our royal mastermind, is here in just 1 minute's time with news on why the royal family have decided to edit Meghan Markle out of their official history altogether. This is a fascinating one. But first, I want to tell you about this amazing product that I have here in my hands, Verso. As you may know, I've entered my 40s and the importance of staying healthy as I age has become really critical to me. So I've decided to focus on prioritizing my health, staying fit, exercising every day, and also doing the 16/8 fast. But scientists like David Sinclair now say that actually we can reverse aging with interventions beyond healthy habits. So this is a product that I knew would enhance everything I was doing, but it's also backed up by solid evidence. That is really important. So that's why I want to tell you about Cell Being by Verso. It has scientifically proven ingredients that fight the effects of aging by increasing NAD+ levels that power every cell in your body. I've actually been taking the product now for a number of months. I take it in the morning, the start of every day. It's genuinely been transformative to me. Fasting's easier. I've lost fat. I'm eating less too. The weight is down. And apparently that's because, according to the team at Verso, it has blood sugar regulating effects which lead to fewer cravings. Sleeping is so much easier too. I wake up with more energy, feeling much happier too. So it's taken years off me. I would love you to experience the same thing. Verso publishes third-party testing from each batch produced to guarantee you are getting what you paid for, and to mark the launch of Outspoken as our first ever sponsor. Verso has an amazing offer for you. If you head to buy.ver.so/outspoken, you will save 15% on your first order by using the coupon code Outspoken. The link is in our YouTube and Rumble description, but to repeat, buy.ver.so/outspoken. Use the coupon code Outspoken. And now back to the show, and time to bring in our royal mastermind, Angela Levin. Angela, great to see you today, but obviously, look, these are sad circumstances, aren't they, after what's happened in Southport? And it was interesting just how quickly we did hear from the royal family, King Charles, and also specifically William and Catherine, talking about their experiences as parents. It really feels like they were emotionally engaged with the story, which isn't a surprise, is it, Angela? Because what's gone on is just depraved. It's subhuman. It's really difficult.
Yes, I think anybody will feel that their heart's been torn open. And I think especially mothers, I don't want to mean anyone else feels less, but actually if you experience how you look after your child and whether you think they can go out on their own or whether they can't, whether you should collect them, whether they're too old, or they're going to be safe. And when you hear something like this, I mean, it just absolutely destroys you. I mean, really what it is a massacre of the innocent, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, children 6, 7 and 9 who are now have died from a knife, just makes you feel too horrific. And I think that the government's absolutely got to very well speed up and make having a knife a very serious thing to do. And you just got to throw them in prison, even if there's no room, doesn't matter. They'll all have to be squashed. I mean, I've worked in a prison and there is always room, and you have to stop it. You have to stop them. And this afternoon, I saw one of them when I was working on the bus, and holding an enormous knife and clinging onto the bus, ready, waving it. And these, you can't have it. You just got to stop it. But when you think about
I know, but Labour's going soft on crime.
Yes, when you think about the little girls, you know, they were obviously so excited to go to the Taylor Swift dancing and making bracelets, and to not to come home after that is just too terrible. Now, it worries me not just what's happened, but how long it stays with them. I mean, will they ever want to leave their parent and go out on their own? Will they ever trust anyone? Will they recover physically from something like this? Will the parents do it, and the grandparents? And, you know, it affects everyone. It's not something you just think of for 2 or 3 days. I mean, I've had, you know, almost
look at those girls,
I
Angela.
couldn't bear it. You know, there were sweet, lovely girls who would love to be a Taylor Swift themselves and would love to dance and see what she's like. I mean, they're absolute adorable for them.
And Angela, we should say actually that Taylor Swift has released a statement on the tragedy. She said, "The horror of yesterday's attack in Southport is washing over me continuously, and I'm just completely in shock. The loss of life and innocence and the horrendous trauma inflicted on everyone who was there, the families and the first responders. These were just little kids at a dance class. I am at a complete loss for how to ever convey my sympathy to these families." But I imagine she will do something for the survivors, and it was nice to hear from her today, wasn't
Yes,
it?
but that was very moving, even her saying that. You know, she obviously did it very quickly, straight away, and you feel it comes absolutely from her heart, and that makes you want to cry anyway. It is
the whole thing.
horrific.
The whole thing has been really, really terrible. But you know what's... Look, nothing's nice about this, but at least we do have our royal family to help us through some of these times. I used to worry, Angela, what would it be like when we didn't have Queen Elizabeth II at these events? Because she was always the person that would see us through really difficult times.
Yes.
In the
She
news.
did with COVID, didn't she?
Yeah.
We were all not knowing what to do, how to stay in, what was allowed, what wasn't. And then the Queen was going to speak one afternoon, and she calmed you down. You made
We will
you
meet
feel there was
again.
someone very strong who was there to look after you, and you felt a bit better. And
I'll
think
never
that-
forget that speech, "We will meet again." It was one
Yes.
of her greatest TV addresses, actually.
Yes.
But look, let's move on, because it's a tough story, and it is important actually that we realize not sometimes to only focus on the negative. And of course there is a lot of royal news coming this week, Angela, and specifically this real shock actually that the royal family are officially editing Meghan Markle out of their history. She doesn't feature once, Angela, in the
Yes.
Royal Collection archives.
Yes, it's very interesting. That collection is in Windsor, and it has well over 1 million things that royals have had, and also photographs of them. And Meghan's not there, neither are the children. There's only one of Harry when he was 10 in 1994, and that's it. Now, I don't know yet whether it's because they're absolutely furious with her, or whether they didn't want their photographs to be part of it, because it could have happened when they were feeling so fed up that they didn't want the royal family at all. That's all changed because they can see that they need it to be a bit to people to like them a bit more, and haven't given them anything. It's not Charles who picks and chooses what should be there, but he is the one who is obviously the king and is very responsible for everything in the monarchy. It's 5 different monarchies, so it's an awful lot, but there's not the space for
I
Harry.
mean, surely, Angela, if Charles or William had wanted Harry and Meghan in there, they would be in there. And I know you say Harry's in there once, but it's a very, very old shot. And she's not in there at all.
No, but they would have to provide with the photograph or whatever they wanted there. And I don't blame them for not actually doing that. Why should they provide it if everybody provides these things? Or a photographer can do that. None of the photographers have wanted to do that either, or managed to do it, or forgotten all about it. So it's very interesting, actually. Very interesting. And they have these huge exhibitions all around, and one near Buckingham Palace. And if anyone wants to try and hunt for one of Meghan, do say you won't find her.
It's not going to be there. Now, Angela, you're hearing, and this is fascinating too, that Meghan Markle has already said she's too busy to return to the UK for the Invictus Games in 2027. So to me, that feels very much like, and I don't think there'll be any tears on this side of the Atlantic, she's never coming back, is she?
Well, we don't know about that yet, but she, when they felt that the next 2027 is going to be in the UK, a lot of people have been wondering what's going to happen about Meghan. And she said she's much too busy. Now, have you ever heard of anyone, even King Charles, hasn't got a full diary for 2.5 years ahead? So it's very interesting that she's too grand for it at the moment, and she's going to be very busy. So we shall see that. But I think that she just, it's like not being invited to the party where all the A people are going, and you just say, "Oh, I'm terribly busy. I haven't got it," or I'll be washing my hair that evening. It's something like that.
But isn't the reality they're making excuses, Angela, and we saw the excuse from Harry last week. Oh, it's all about security, and could she be the victim of an acid attack, etc., etc. But isn't the reality, Angela, that after they arrived at St. Paul's Cathedral and were met with boos, they are very concerned about the type of reception that they will receive from the public? And I don't mean violence, because of course violence is completely unacceptable, but boos are a way that royal fans sometimes express how they feel about a member.
Well, I think that that was very obvious, really, that she would actually not want to be anywhere where people were booing her, because she's very, very, very thin-skinned. That's why I don't think she'll do any good trying to be a politician. But she can't cope with anybody saying something rude about her, saying something true about her, sort of booing her, not liking her. She has to be adored. I mean, she is, one of the most amazing people in the world. She thinks
in her own mind.
She just can't, in her own mind, and in Harry's mind too. He does think she's a most amazing woman, because he said that she could have been a wonderful queen. I think she'd be the most dreadful queen, but and he thinks that Diana loves her and thinks she's wonderful, which he hasn't managed to discover that for sure, because she's up in heaven, but he points up a lot and feels her there. And the Queen is helping him and supporting him up there. I mean, he's got his own way of understanding things, but she won't stand for that. So she keeps away and goes where people think she's absolutely wonderful. And if something goes wrong, she just closes her mind to it and moves on. I wish anybody could do that. We all could do that. If someone's not very nice to us, try and block it. But I think she's a sort of genius at doing that, because she carries on as if that's never happened.
And Angela, you're not believing these latest reports about some sort of peace summit between the Sussexes and the royal family. What are you hearing?
No, I think this is one of these nonsenses that the PR companies try and keep her in the front pages. Could you imagine that they would want her there to discuss what's going to happen in the next 10 years of the royal family? Of course not. She wasn't allowed in there when she went off before Harry did in 2020, and they left being working royals. And also they couldn't trust her that she wouldn't take a lot of the information back and sell it. It's not a problem, really. It's the thing is that the King Charles is there, and that will be followed by Prince William, and that's nearly really as far as they need to go. I mean, why do they need to put Meghan in there? They're not, or her son or daughter. It's just not. It's just to say that she's needed, she's wanted. She doesn't want to be left out, you see. She's got to be the head of it, and she can pretend then that she organised the whole thing and did it brilliantly and all that. But I think it's absolute nonsense, and it's not going to happen. And I can't even imagine them wanting to discuss it too much. What is there to discuss? It seems very simple. There's a king, and then there'll be another king. And that's how it goes. And then another king. That's how it goes on. Hopefully, if they can live their lives.
Indeed. Now, this week, Angela, we see Meghan's hypocrisy yet again off the scales because she's taken another private jet, this time from Montecito to the Hamptons in New York, so that she can hang out with her celebrity mates, Misha Nunu and Bobby Brown, as she prepares to launch her lifestyle product. But how can she claim to be an environmentalist, Angela, when she can't even be bothered to get on a coast-to-coast commercial flight in America? This is unbelievable, isn't it?
Well, Harry explains it very simply again, but it's not safe enough for her. That's why he said he's not going to bring her to the UK. It's not safe enough. So if you say that, therefore, how is she going to get there? She takes a plane. They have different rules for themselves and a different way of looking at the truth. You say you can't do that because you've been saying, nobody should do that. And they say, well, we don't do that, but we have to go that way because otherwise, it wouldn't be safe. So they just turn it round. It's one of the things I think awful, and one of the things that Harry has adopted from her, which he didn't have before. He was very straightforward with humour. And now he sort of makes things very complicated.
And he was humble too, right? Like, there's nothing humble about saying that it's impossible to go on a commercial flight between New York and Los Angeles. I mean, Angela, loads of high-profile people in America who are even more famous than Harry and Meghan do that every single day. There's no need to take a private jet.
There's never anybody more famous than Harry and Meghan. That's what's in Meghan's mind. You can't say that, Dan. Everybody is lower down. What I find strange is that she wears very strange clothes. She's beautiful. She could look lovely, but sometimes she looks as if she's taken it out of the dustbin and shaken it, and it's, all crushed and full of creases. But the thing is that she did walk around Hamptons talking to her friends and trying to sell the American Riviera orchard without a single person to be secure for her. There's no security there for her. I was told that. Now you have that again.
So what, in terms of investors in the business?
No, there were no security of people looking after her as she wandered around. I
see. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So
so it's not for security reasons why she's taking the private jet. It's just for laziness reasons.
But when she got there was nobody there who was a security officer who was going to follow her around and make sure that she was okay. She had a lovely time. She was there on her own, talking to her friends, enjoying herself enormously, and trying to get people to put money in the American Riviera orchard. We'll see if she does anything like that. But, how can she say how much she needs the security? How can Harry really drive himself mad with anxiety that he's not getting all these men to be looking after her, and then suddenly she's fine? So sure, she was with an A-list of people and she might not have needed them, but she makes such a fuss that even if she goes down the road with a dog, or you've got to have somebody there to look after her.
But she's often like, backgrid, paparazzi, come and take a picture. I mean, we know there's so much hypocrisy. Can we actually just take a look at that photo of Meghan again, where you're referring to her clothes looking a little bit crumpled up with her in New York alongside Nunu and Bobby Brown? One thing, Angela, that there's a bit of speculation about is that Meghan may well be on the Ozempic jabs or the Wegovy or the Mounjaro. The fat jabs, because people are saying she has lost a lot of weight, Angela.
Yes, she's very thin at the moment. She's very, very thin. And so therefore the rumours that she's pregnant, I don't think is quite right either. But I think that's another thing that's just dangling. But she's got this jacket, but the trousers, hang on the floor, very creased. They're one of these baggy trousers, which is fine if you like that, but it's sort of all creased and crumpled.
So Angela Levin's advice is, Meghan, buy an iron.
Well, she's got staff, hasn't she? She must have staff.
Oh, she has staff, all right. They just don't last for very long.
No.
Angela Levin, you stand by, because there's way more from you in the after show. Lots more royal exclusives. Remember, it's very important to me that we have a safe space not patrolled by big tech, where censorship and control runs deep. So that's why I have launched www.outspoken.live, our membership section, where you will get a half hour of extra content every day. So at this stage, we come off YouTube and Rumble. We're moving to our own platform for the rest of our discussion with Angela Levin. She has lots more big royal news. All you have to do is sign up at www.outspoken.live. Remember, we're back tomorrow at 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hit subscribe right now if you're watching on YouTube and Rumble. And most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you. See you on the after show with much more from Angela Levin.